At the bottom of what it's all about, man is free, and therefore he needs to be free to be virtuous. If he's not free to be virtuous, then it doesn't matter what else he's free to do. And you can look around at the media and all the rest of the shit that's in our world and see that there's not much virtue there at all. And therefore it is very important that we allow space for nature to move in, right? Like I said, the Plutonic light, to then excise, right? To do surgery and cut off all this dirty, rotten, infection. All of these cysts, all of this cancer. Something out of our hands does indeed occur to get rid of it. And what we need to do is stand back with reverence and realize it's moving in the world. It is the ultimate Holy Spirit in the sense that it is the will of man, the morality underneath, that just simply, it's an order that doesn't accept pestilence. It does it for a while, and then finally it moves in to deal with it. And we need to be very conscious of that. Let that action happen and not focus on a lot of the other issues that are going on, unless it's totally rational and justified. Like, yeah, I do stand against Islam, and I do it openly because, yeah, to me, there's no question about it, that the message of history and my own experiences show me that it is a pestilential thing. There are no moderates, really. People go, well, my dentist is a Muslim, he's a really nice guy. Of course he has to be. He has to wear a suit and tie. It's called stealth jihad. Have you no brain at all? But is he an artist? Is he a composer? Is he a musician? Is he an architect? Is he doing anything for your actual culture? Or is he just parasiting up the culture he found here? If he was back in his own country, where would he be? That's what you got to think about. He's not necessarily, he may be functioning, running a gas station or something, but that's all created by Western man. He didn't create it. And what is he really doing? No, nor am I saying that he should be killed or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But we've got to realize what we're dealing with here. And if these people that are so-called moderates are loath to condemn the extremists, then they need to be deported as well, as far as I'm concerned, because what you're doing is preserving culture. Now, the culturalist person cannot hear our words, so I don't talk to them. In fact, I never speak about these things to anyone, in the world. But I certainly wouldn't speak to somebody who was without culture. If the only book on their table is what do you have over there, the TV Times, or what is it,
just like the I guess the newspaper. Most people just, or the Reader's Digest or whatever.
Yeah. Or that thing, where you look up what TV program you're going to be using.
Just like the TV guide.
TV guide, right. So if that's all I saw on their shelf, right? Or Madonna's sex book, or something along those lines, right? The autobiography of Oprah Winfrey, fuck, what a classic, I'm going to go, right, here we are, sorry mate, but you're cultural fucking deviant, so we won't be talking about anything, that we're talking about right today. I'm not going to tell you to go over and read my Constitution Con article or what I think about current affairs, We'll just say, can you stick on the barbecue? I'm a vegetarian, you got any veggie burgers? No, we'll go out and get some then, come on. That's about the sum total of it. I'm not going to get into any of this other stuff because it is literally impossible for the person who's been drowned in parchment idolatry, drowned in some pap they've heard at the local church, or in some charity, or I go to the United Nations website, I'm checking out all this communitarian stuff. It's wonderful. Well, the people who are telling you to hug the world are the ancient destroyers of the world. Can you compute this? For 2,000 years, they've butchered untold millions. They have created an ideology that has given rise to a sixth extinction scenario in which you have no connection with nature. They butchered indigenous tribes. Their own financial orgs to this day play cat and mouse with these foreign, including the British Empire did it as well. But they play cat and mouse with the economies of these foreign countries so they can never come to solvency, so that you can guarantee that they'll have hatred towards the West when it's not the West who's done anything to them. And so on and so on. So for 2,000 years, this org out of Rome has done this. And you are now going to tell me that you have the solutions, and that anyone who comes to tell you any of this, it needs to be locked up, or the websites need to be shut down, or whatever else they threaten you with. You know what I mean? Yeah. But and then again, the final thing I'll say on solutions is, look, even if that happened to be the case, right, where you were personally compromised, Paul Joseph Watson recently was given death threats. If things like that comes to that level and say, you might end up being arrested, go ahead. You just arrested a complete set of encyclopedias. So the absolute last person that you want to be putting into a jail or any other place where there's a captive audience is me. Because if you arrest me, I'm Irish, mate, and I will turn that place into a bastion of truth in a couple of weeks. Because I know how to get into the psychology of all those other prisoners. I know what makes them tick. I can speak to them as they need to be spoken to, and I can show them the error of their ways better than any human being on this planet, and I can show them the bigger picture clearer than anybody on this planet, and therefore you do not want me in any kind of situation where I have access to a microphone, which is in that kind of a situation. So you know what they do? They just leave you alone. They did bloody well better. Because that's one of the solutions, is be so up on this subject matter, be so fearless and articulate, that the last thing the establishment wants to do is give you any kind of publicity or put you in any kind of situation where you're talking with ordinary human beings, be they police or be there anyone else that you might be surrounded by.
That's right.
Because deep in the heart of every single human being, you see, is the knowledge that they've been had, the knowledge that there's been corruption on the levels of politics and religion, but they've not been able to articulate it. Most people know it, but they cannot articulate it. And even when they try to do so, they usually do it in a very impoverished and wrong-headed way. Like I said, the blacks against the whites, the Native American Indians against the American whites, or the guys over there against the capitalists or whatever. It's all ineffectual. It's only true to a point. And that's where we basically come to up until the point of this alternative movement being created, even though some of the people or most of the people still within this movement need to brush up and not fall for those old hackneyed, outworn, ways of looking at the world. But it has happened. The new dimension, the new perception has happened, and that's why I did the Papacy article recently, is because now it is the time for people to digest who the main architects of control are, how they work, what their weaponry is, things like mental reservation, things like using these orgs that appear to be neutral, throwing money around with charities, and never ever for a moment imagine that these people are what they appear to be. And then knowing the history of how much they've undermined, and knowing that then, as we said in this interview, they're quite capable in this process of finally turning on those that they used and say, you're done. You're going no further. We're going on with the journey. We're taking all the food. We need it, so we're taking your water and all. You go, wait a minute. We carried all your boxes for you. We opened the jungle for you. We fought off all those wild beasts for you. Yeah, I know, guy, but we don't need you anymore. We're going on. We want to go light. So that could be happening right now. And that means that Zionism could be downsized. Islam itself could be either downsized or even wiped out. It just depends what they're feeling on a different day. How far they want to go with this. And sure, that will mean more money for the West, but not for you and me. It's only for those people who have been running the West, running it as a system, who've been, as I said, responsible for the destruction, the subversion of authentic, again, not perfect, but authentic modes of government, which have already been created. So while you were focused on your communism, and other people focused on their Marxism, and other people focused on some other Christian democracy or blah, 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 like a country like Sweden, they didn't know about other things. And any man in any culture, like Finland once used to know about these things. Finland was very much an ally of Germany, and that's because they were supremely anti-communist. You can't think of a more anti-communist country than Finland. And so, of course, they were always pro-German, weren't they? Yeah, but any of those German scholars, just like any of those Serbian scholars or Croatian scholars who knew what we're talking about, they were all wiped out. Their books are not published, so you're not going to read about them. And then people like me come along and go, well, you can't read those books because they're not translated, but you can read Avril Manhattan. His works are in English, and he was a friend of all those guys. If there's a guy who's unpublished in the world, Avril Manhattan knew about him personally, and he translated his books, or he put the content of those books into his books. Or a Eustace Mullins, or a G. Edward Griffin, or a Yuri Lina. Some people are really, high-end, top of the list, the ones you really need to read. And I know many others to boot. Some of the, like we'll put links below later on in the description, 2 or 3 books for people to read that really help to show you what I'm talking about. Because to sort of finish our conversation, I just say, don't believe me. There's nothing I'm saying that hasn't been researched, both in real time and also through the 30 years of what I've been doing. Even going back into the 80s, a lot of this stuff was, especially about Germany, was of interest to me back then. I got my Germanophobia website, which is the result of nearly, I started researching, can you believe that, in 1976, between 1979. It was actually in a religious class in Belfast. In my religious class, we were told to do certain projects.
Oh,
And I
really?
was already realizing that what they were telling us about Nazi Germany was a pack of lies. And then very gradually from that time on, from watching all of these propagandist documentaries and then the films, the World at War, a whole colossal amount of media propaganda that came out and was constantly shown on British TV down through the war years and into the 70s. So I grew up amongst that, but I never believed one single word of it. But I did know a lot of it, and in my own way became pretty much an authority. And then later on, as I got more into the occult and started studying about German Freemasonry and German Ariosophy, which then led up to the Aryan movements, the negative Aryan movements, the pseudo-Aryan movements, and then got into studying things like German mysticism, German romanticism, German idealism, you name it, right? Then I started to see what is going on here. Now I understand. And then when I came across these alliances that Germany was thinking of having so that it could immediately separate itself from its age-old true enemies, which is Britain and France, and their lackeys, and it nearly succeeded. And because it nearly succeeded, and because America was going to be tied in there, America's great future was an alliance with Germany that I then believe would have eventually brought in Slavic Russia. And then the Austro-Hungarian Empire is always follows. Where Germany goes at that time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was bound to follow. And then we would have had a world order that would have been absolutely different than the one that these rotten, disgusting, perfidious creatures, and that includes your Bushes, but also all the way back through your Thatchers and pretty much everyone, all the way back to Roosevelt and before even back to Teddy Roosevelt. The experiment went wrong. And this is demonstrably proven, so people need to go to my forum. They can read the articles. I've worked my fingers to the bone, to put it in writing, and also interviews and what have you. So every single thing I'm saying is backed up. If after reading all of that stuff you go, no, I think you're wrong, hey, I'm with you. Okay, go ahead, you have the perfect right. But you have no right to call me a bigot or a racist or a prejudiced person without knowing where I'm coming from. Because on these interviews and even in other podcasts, I have to abbreviate, don't I? On Facebook, we're abbreviating. I'm doing a million things during the day. So if I go to type something in a Facebook, that's just a tiny little sentence, a little abbreviation. How could you possibly hold me to what I just said there? Of course it's not in context. Of course it might be sounding contradictory to something I've written before. But that's not me. That's just the World Wide Web. That's just the medium itself doing that. Everybody else does it too. So the only way to really take on to be our true critic, not a cynic, is to go and research everything that this man, he's in the public eye, he's speaking all the time, he's got these crazy ideas, he's bringing up all these thoughts, he's talking about history. I'm going to go and verify it. I'm going to go and check it out and read that material myself, and there's a good chance that I'll agree, but even if I don't, well, then you've got Tsarion's approval, because he goes, yeah, come up with another theory then. Because at the end of the day, this is my subjective understanding of history. I have a lot of insider, experience. And I say a lot, meaning a lot. It was really something to grow up the way I did. And a lot of that has come out of seeing all of these rival groups, both Protestant groups in Ireland, both Republican groups in Ireland, both socialists, Republicans, extremists, all sorts of anarchists, and then other aspects of my cultural and family background, letting me have a very, very good view of all of these things. Like, didn't you say yourself you worked in politics with a leading politician in who was it you mentioned?
It was Paul Hellyer, yeah. He's like over his 90s now, but he was one of the longest standing politicians here in Canada, and he kind of witnessed what happened here to destroy this country. Yeah,
and that's second to none. That experience that you had is second to none, and that means that you have certain standing, you have wisdom, you have understanding. See, they need that. The average bozo who's just sitting on his couch, flicking through the channels. We're not them. We don't want to be them. We want to celebrate the fact that we've read the Ralph Epperstons and, we know about the Federal Reserve and we know about it. And we're continuing. We're not perfect because we're continuing in our own research. But when we deign to put something out there on the World Wide Web, that's an act of bravery. And it's an act of intelligence, because that as long as intelligence reigns, as long as there is, freedom and intuition and reason, and there is, then of course you've got to do what you have to do. You just can't sit at home and shiver under the staircase.
I can't live with myself, just, experiencing what I've experienced, learning what I've learned, having the opportunity to speak with the people I've spoken with, to just sit down now, especially now that I'm a father in this world. And I've been raised in something like martial arts, which is designed to give you a spine in life. and to stand up against tyranny and injustice against people who have no idea what the hell is coming down. There's no friggin' way in hell I can just sit on my ass and just go, okay, well, I'll just let you guys think what you want and do what you want. And I'm not sitting here saying I know, what I know is a fraction of what there is to be known. I'm still learning from many of the greats and doing my own research. But I echo what you're saying, Michael, because what I'm doing here and what I've always done is come from a place of a passionate response to this and saying, look, we need to figure this shit out. You don't have to agree with me, and maybe one day I'm going to change my mind on certain things and then come back to something else. And everybody's like, oh, you're contradicting yourself there. Well, it's a learning process, So that's part of it. And I'm here from a passion of wanting to see intelligence and justice and truth and proper harmony brought back in, proper order, aligned with the natural order. I don't want to see this disgusting shit taking place again and again and again around the world and us repeating the same cycle. So you're damn right I'm going to start talking about it and voicing my opinion. And I agree with you. It takes a lot of courage, but it's something that definitely has to be done. And I don't see this kind of courage from a lot of these trolls on the internet who just run around and comment on people's pages without a clue and who don't produce work themselves. Half these guys have like 0 subscribers and no video history or no documented books or writings or anything or any kind of attempt whatsoever. They're just running around critiquing other people's work. So I don't know. I think that if you're out there watching what's going on and you think you're just going to sit by and watch it, that's just not the kind of cloth that I'm cut from. So I totally echo what you're saying there, Michael.
And I have friends that I don't need to look out any further to internet trolls. I've got people, are closer than that, and they're pig ignorant as well. You talk to them on these matters, and they think they just can't get around it because they know nothing, and I can see that they know nothing. So I don't need any worldly or people I don't know to show me, how much I do know and how long the journey has been. I just need to look at the productions and mentality of people that are, on a closer level to see how utterly ridiculously shallow they are. I don't get into changing their ways, but I do observe it and see what you're talking about is perfect. Carry on to what we're talking about. We've been speaking about culture all the way through this interview. Yeah, but culture is not just a passive thing we've been describing, where you're just a passive inheritor of cultural motifs and cultural tropes, down from the past. The really cultural man is one who adds to his culture. So as a teacher of martial arts, you are emboldening and continuing to develop the culture of people that have now passed. I do the same thing in my work, and even a good artist does the same thing, a poet, a sculptor, an architect, an industrialist. You're carrying on, a musician, you're carrying on the tradition, so you're actually active in culture. Now, if you are active in culture, you have the perfect right to defend it in whatever way you want, and no one has the right to contradict you. You have the right, because you're cultural. So one of the things that we've lost in this world is that moral high ground. I call it being morally superior, because the opposite is what's known as a constitutional psychological inferior, and believe me, the world and the internet is full of them. And therefore they will want to, out of envy or jealousy or whatever, or just pig ignorance, or again, they could be even agents, come after you to try and find your weak spots, or just, it's usually not even that, it's just usually complete slur, it's complete diatribe, it's complete a character assassination and so on. But they have no right, because the cultural man has the right. If you're doing something to not just passively accept the culture, and even that is still good, by the way. If you're nothing more than just a receptacle for the culture, the great movies, the great art, you are aware of it, so you don't have to be really super conscious of it, because you're in the ambience of it. And if I was to sit with anybody, I go, so what kind of art do you like? Well, I really like the French Impressionists. How do you even say that? You say, oh, I like Beethoven, like in the Clockwork Orange, at least he liked Beethoven. So it's like, that's a cultural person to that degree. You have culture around you, you take it for granted. But the next step up is the man who actually contributes to his culture through articles, through films, through whatever it is. And then that person, whether others like it or not, does have the right, because he's got that extra few stripes. Because in order to create culture, he's been involved in the only process that matters on this planet. Because the real process has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. That's an anti-process. Right? The cultural man is involved in the actual thing and the only thing that matters, which is culture. And therefore, he then, as that man, is a full man. And doesn't even mean if he's wrong or right in other areas in what he's doing. That's a second thing to look at. But because he's involved in the culture, he is already given a certain badge of approval, a certain right to come in and say, no, this is what I believe. But you see, unfortunately, that leaves out 90% of the people you and I have to deal with on a daily basis. So from the time, say, I started, which was technically in 98, but it became more like, I was still on TV in 98. So when I first came online in 98, from that point, I've had to deal with people who've been culturalists. People who've even fallen away. I mean, you go through whole generations of these idiots. And the one thing I've always known is that they don't matter. It's like why James Dio, when he came on Black Sabbath, when he was the first singer after Ozzy, and most of the crowd would be giving him the finger, and a lot of them would even bring signs to say, you're an asshole, you do off, you this, you that. And Dio said, yeah, I never give him any thought because I'm on stage, you're not.
Right.
He was just able to summarize it. Said, I am, I've got my statement of higher value. I'm here doing what I'm doing, and I know that it's reaching the world. And he was absolutely 100% correct. So all these people who usually are bashing you are culturalists. They're one level above the monkey, and maybe even that's too good. But the internet has given them this perfect megaphone to be able to blast and scream and get their own frustrations out as they sit in some little hovel in Wolverhampton or wherever the hell it is, or Southern Ireland or whatever, sitting there tapping away, just throwing dust and making a noise and ranting. Little worms, little wannabes, little thieves. These are not the people we need to listen to, and they will have no say. So we have to just continue. And continue, one, with being a cultural person. Don't let them put you off. Continue to write, continue to think, continue to produce fantastic stuff. Doesn't mean it's all perfect. Doesn't mean there's not error within it. But that's, as you said, it's a process. You keep on going. And then as a cultural person, start to wear that badge, brightly, polish it. Go, yeah, I've got a right to stand up and say, here's my comments on, religion. Here's my comments on culture. And that's what good journalists do. That's what good writers and thinkers and critics of society do. The cynic is a little maggot, a little jealous, envious creature who it's very obvious to see their motives. It's very obvious to see how they've magpied from other people and done it very, very blasé. The world is full of people like that.
They've lost connection to their own inner light, their own inner intelligence. They've shut that off completely, and then they, like we've spoken about in the psychic vampirism work, they try to steal it from others.
That's right. And even though I've written on it myself, and I'm not a psychic vampire, but the person who's usually the most up on that subject is an energy vampire, which is a strange paradox I pointed out. So it's just like all detectives know that usually, a detective can make the best criminal. There are these strange quirks, but also a criminal can also pretend to be the most innocent because he's the criminal. So you have all these paradoxes, and therefore, if you let these kinds of people, throw you off or deter you or whatever, it's no good. Keep your eyes on the cultural aspects that have enriched you, and continue to try in your own way, as perfect as can be, without a lot of self-sadism, without a lot of self-criticism. Carry on and work slowly to perfecting. And you work with a body, so you would know more than any intellectual even how important practice is. It's important intellectually, but it's the person who works with a body who really knows that if you turn it off, you're dead. If you keep going, there is indeed a thing called perfection. Isn't that true?
Exactly. That is so important. I think we have to understand the intelligence of the body and how it works with your mental processes, how it helps you have a clearer state of mind, understanding the importance of health in your life. A lot of the people that I speak to, they might be up on certain parts, but they're very unaware of what their body is, and they actually almost demonize their own body. Everybody's so self-critical of their body, and they're so afraid and so shy, all the time physically, because of all the mind control or whatever's out there in the media, that they have no connection to it, and they're actually missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And so I absolutely believe, get your chi flowing, get your energy flowing, get moving, find something that's right for you. For me, it was martial arts, but for you, it could be anything. And then that way you're going to start to actually become educated, because you're working with nature itself. You're working with the vehicle that you have to express your consciousness here in this world. And by doing that, your consciousness and your true imperial self will shine through more, because you're able to have a good metaphor in front of you every single day that's referencing these higher truths. And that's really what I see through these physical practices. So absolutely.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. It teaches you things that just by thinking mentally, and feeling, that's only part of it. You've got to get that body moving. I mean, I do it out of revenge, actually. I'm a very strange kind of bird. I do it for revenge of all those years I had to sit in the cubicle or in the classroom, in that Pink Floyd Bastille, where your body was, unlike in Steiner or Krishnamurti school, where they never allow you to do that. They get you out and they have a whole bunch of different ways that they get the kids to, negotiate uneven ground, walk on bare feet, work on those children's apparatus, where you'd find in an average, I don't know what they're
like
called.
A jungle gym or whatever. Or
exactly.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. To get into I never went to one of those schools, so I was very envious of it. But I believe in the physical because of that it's revenge on those people who forced your somatic intelligence to be constrained, as you said, shackled, and sit there while they're force feeding your brain, but your body is uncoordinated, and then you do start hating it. Then if it's too flabby or you get too many pimples or whatever, and then what happens in Irish schools, probably in Britain as well, in America, is other kids would then pick on, the ugly ones or the fat ones or the weird ones, right? And so if you didn't have body hate to begin with, because you didn't have that in your home life, well, you're certainly going to have it by the time you've gone through school, because the other kids are just going to rag you to death, because you weren't able to run as fast or whatever. So this was, a key area in which not only constraining the physical energy of the body is lethal, it's absolutely diabolical. And it starts from the moment that you enter into the kindergarten or even the primary school. So one has to take revenge. I mean, I'm telling people right now, you need to avenge yourself on that level, that your parents forced you to do that, the teachers did. And so Qigong and martial arts and Aikido, even in the early stages of Aikido for people, is very, very good, because it is literally it's giving the body that sigh of relief that it's wanted all those years. And it will help to dissipate the waves and waves of self-hatred, which is bringing us down. That self-hatred, again, we didn't talk about it in this interview, but that self-hatred is the hatred that the big brother co-ops. So again, solutions, physical movement, because it introduces you to the body, helps you get rid of your self-hate, and then you've just uninstalled from yourself one of the key things by which all tyrannical edifices, control you by. Not just the ancient trauma, that's their main focus, but your topical ontogenetic, meaning in this life, your waves and waves of I'm not tall enough, I'm not intellectual enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this enough.
Right.
All that, I'm not fast runner enough, whatever it might be, I'm not wealthy enough. All the waves and waves of self-violence that we do to ourselves can be one by one cancelled. And so the person who commits ritually, not just because they got nothing better to do, I'll go join the martial arts club around the corner, but if they come there willfully to know, I understand the purpose of why I'm doing this, then they're committed. And, the teacher and they have a rapport then, because there's actually an agenda now, there's an objective to reach. And so for me, it was always a matter of vengeance. I'm not going to let those ones who tied my body down, who constricted my somatic energy, and as I'm showing in this latest Path of the Fool episode, the Hermit, through the work of Wilhelm Reich, shadow work is actually body work. This is what they've all missed, all these fake writers and teachers trying to talk about Jung's shadow. They have never read Reich, so they don't know dick. They don't know that the shadow is actually the body. Okay, I agree that the shadow can be other things theoretically, but what it really is in its most pragmatic version is what Wilhelm Reich knew. It's the energy and the bioenergy contained within the body. And if that's not moving, then you don't have intelligence. You just got this hot thing in your skull called the brain, and you have the idea that that is intelligence. But intelligence is something far, far more incorporealized and fleshy and real. And so that is one of the big solutions of our world, is to get people out into the Tai Chis, eventually, like Bruce Lee, they can come up with their own thing. And even if they don't go in a formal class, I recommend that they do start synthesizing, or bringing together different disciplines and make up something of your own. But if you do have the inclination to get out and meet people as well, it's great to go and do martial arts and things like that, because it will be incredibly healing, not just on a physical healing point of view, but on a psychic healing point of view, and also on this conspiratorial level. You coming more into your center. And so the big brother has less power over you. You become like a warrior. It's like your own term that you use for yourself, truth warrior. That's exactly what I say it is as well.
Well, thank you for that, because this is actually the whole thesis that I'm trying to put together myself. It's what I've been feeling for a long time. And, just never maybe found the right context or the right words or the right timing until now at this stage in my life. And, you know, I'm actually going to be also debunking a lot of the bullshit that's encoded in the martial art community as I see it, because it's also been turned into a lot of dogmas and a lot of, you know, Bruce Lee spoke a lot about this, about these fixed patterns and getting everybody through repetition and doing all these things. And you lose that freedom of expression and that freedom of being, which is the whole point of this. And, you know, using the conflict or using the fact that, you know, you're training an art of combat as a metaphor for your life so that you're combating those negative forces that you have within you, the doubt, the fear, the trauma. You're combating this long-lived trauma that we've got within us. You know, it's acting in very much the same way that yoga, the real yoga, was supposed to be used as a way of healing these things. So I've used it so many ways with children especially, and I've seen the most bullied, picked on, you know, shadow of a self kid come in and turn into what I would consider a warrior, absolutely, and actually come in and start bringing the bullies in to sign up for the class, and then starting to turn them and make change in their lives, you know. So this is the true. This is just, and there's many other ways, you know. There's many other ways of doing it, but I personally like martial arts because, and especially in the context in which we're talking, because we are in a great war. Because we're really trying to sharpen people's metal again and get them in touch with their inner power and get them in touch with their capabilities and boost their confidence. I mean, you can't get into these kinds of subjects if you have no confidence and no inner knowing of who you are. You can't, you won't survive the journey. And I see it's happened to so many people in this alternative movement where they just didn't have that good inner constitution within themselves, so they couldn't go past a certain point. And I think that's why this sort of idea needs to come out now, because it's a tremendous way to help bring that empowerment that's going to come, that will help then lead people to that greater knowledge.
You're totally right. And remember that self-esteem, or I call it the statement of higher value, that is not mentally, it's only partly mentally established. You have to do it through the body as well. You have to do it, as I said, as part of culture, like you were talking about the kid becoming, you've just introduced him, he's not just been introduced into martial arts, he's been introduced to his culture.
Right.
Or to a culture, and that is what inspires, because you become a being by being born, right? Your biology makes you a being, but the culture makes you a self. So a person cannot even find their statement of higher value, their self-esteem. You know, you can read self-esteem books all day long, and it's very good that you should. You know, Nathaniel Branden, other people that talk, but that's just reading, that's for the mind. Then now you can grasp the concept. How you actually really activate it is through the body. Another thing that happens with that as well is not just the shadow work, but the idea that how could you possibly be fighting Big Brother when you're getting fat and flabby on their food, on their drink, on their smokes, just basically on their culture? You're in their culture. You're imbibing their culture. How can you get back to nature when you're living on the dead animals and things like that? So there's a whole ethos here to be taken on board. And the person who works with the body slowly starts to purge, from the conditioning also, that the less aware people are involved in, and they will end up, first of all, they're in the culture of the establishment, and they're going to end up more in it because they're going to end up taking the pharmaceutical drugs to ease their pain, and then finally they're going to end up, a big pharma, in a situation in which the doctor or the hospital is taking care of them because they have no knowledge of their body. They're not even aware of why the body might even be ill, and also then they have to endure the agony and pain because they didn't look after the body, and the body's reaction to that will be, hey, there's going to be cancer, there's going to be all sorts of ill health. I agree that in certain people's cases that can be inflicted. Some of your ailments are not your cause. They were inflicted through stress and trauma by other evil people in your family and around you, for sure, and you have to deal with that. But in the most part, people have lived a very decadent life and they've had choices, and they simply think of the body as merely a vehicle, as you say, something to denigrate, something to compare with some other, pop hero or imbecile airhead, that the media has thrown up. But, those people are totally, utterly neurotic. So what are you comparing yourselves with them for? It's crazy. So yeah, it's partly also this deprogramming. These martial arts and things help you deprogram from the beast, which wants to keep you fluoridated, mercury in your eyes, do you know, whatever way you look at it, but eating the white bread and the sugar and all of that stuff, people have to, if not cut that out, then at least massively downsize it so that then they can be a good model to any kids that are around them. A kid walks into your house and he sees a weight training setup or some freaking samurai swords. Yep, friend for life.
Exactly.
If I've seen a throwing star, right, and it's somebody, because in London, when we lived as a child, a lot of people were black belts and stuff. See if I ever even seen a throwing star. That was it. I wanted to never leave.
Exactly. It's it was something that captured me at a young age as well. And I think when I see that, I can tell the kids that are sort of forced into my class, they're just their parents just bring them in, plop them down and go turn them into something. And then there's all those other kids that, they come in with this light in their eyes that's like, oh my God, I have to do this. This is just amazing. And once they catch on to it, you'd be surprised how you can turn like the most feeble looking, scrawny kid into a black belt that's out there winning gold medals and just shining like unbelievably. And it was all had to do with changing their mindset and inspiring them, just like you said. If you can pass on that torch of inspiration, man, you've made it contagious. You've brought out something good in that person. The healthy aspects of who they are will start to come out naturally. They just sometimes today, these kids, they're so absorbed in this anti-culture that's called culture that they don't have a reference point. They don't have role models anymore. They're very few and far between, especially from the parent level right up to whatever they're throwing out on the media or the school teachers or whatever. Now if you can just a little bit shine that light to them, especially with these young kids when their minds are just starting to form, then you're already doing humanity in this world a great service.
Yeah, and you can do it one by one. You see, the cultural aspect, healing the world isn't doing it in a grandiose way. It's the little martial art Taoist guy who just had a little backyard and he saw 4 or 5 people. That's changing the world.
Yeah,
it changed me. I was into Bruce Lee. When I was young, I was into the martial arts movies. Like The Word of Margin, which is a show that used to be shown in the 70s here. Old martial arts mania.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And anything like Monkey. All these different stories. And the mobility, because I actually believe that when people are talking about magic, martial arts is magic. Aikido, to me, is magic.
It is. It actually, Aikido is just talking about energy, moving energy, how to understand energy. And what are we talking about when we say energy? We're talking about that positive force, that magic.
But the movement, even the movements are magical. So that to me is magic. I don't look at it as being something supernatural. Magic and miracle is the movement of the body. In this constructive way where you're dealing with a life force. And of course, it's not just what people think is overcoming an enemy. It's all the other things we've just been talking about freeing yourself from any kind of control, being psychically immune. But it can be done mentally to a degree. It has to be done bodily. I'm now thinking back on it. Yeah, my uncle did know a couple of guys. They're from the East, but there was one Malaysian guy, I think, and one guy was like half Chinese or something like that, and they were martial arts. So just talking about it reminded me, I think the most hypnotizing thing I'd ever seen, the thing I loved beyond, was guitar. When I ever saw a guitar or had a chance to touch one, that was the most hypnotizing thing for me. But second to that was definitely, things connected to the martial arts. It was just incredible. And the whole idea that also, even in the act of combat, there's an integrity with the enemy. There's a common ground also.
Yeah, I've trained with many of some of my best friends, and we've had some of the most glorious wars together. And we look at each other as something that's going to sharpen each other's blade. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes in the dojo and they go, "Oh, you're beating up your friends, and what are you doing?" And it's just violence. And I'm like, "No, you're ignorant. You don't understand. There's a communication happening between 2 warriors. That's a totally different ballgame. Nobody's getting killed here. Nobody's enacting violence. Violence means violation. That's the thug on the street that's coming up to violate your sovereignty, and you need to know how to deal with that. But when you're talking about 2 warriors coming together to play the instrument of the body and work on it like a chess match, that's like looking at 2 chess masters and you're like, oh, you're beating each other up. You're so violent. It's a total misunderstanding of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And they don't have the ones who are the thug version. I talk about in the Hermit, somatic dissociation, where parts of the body are numb, cold to the touch. People don't even realize this. So the thug is the person who's not comfortable in his body, whereas the martial artist is the one who's mastered his body. The temperature of his body is balanced. His homeostasis is balanced. He can stand for many hours. He can endure, and he can also, through the process you're talking about, get to know another person just with a glance of the eyes or the subtlest of body language. Whereas the thug, you see, he can't read any of that. He's basically dissociated in that as well. So the community is what you're talking about. It's not an act of violence. It's actually getting to know yourself through another, so that even the slightest look or the slightest gesture, and even sometimes even without those things, from even looking at a person just as they're sitting still or walking, you can tell what's on their mind. You can tell by looking at a photograph, what this person's going to do, or what level they're on, what mentality they're on, this kind of thing. All of these subtle senses that are not part of the five senses, but they're something deeper intuitions, deeper of the core self. But you can't even get to that level if you yourself are not only psychically dissociated, because we always think of mental illness being that exactly what I just said, mental. No. Long before you get the mental illness, you have to have somatic illness, meaning parts of your body don't exist. And then when you have an injury, right? When you have an injury of something like, a girlfriend once, she had a very bad foot injury and it persisted for years. She got it like skiing or something, but it turned out to be a persistent. Yeah, why? Because that's that part of the body calling to you for some other reason. And so you had the accident because there's something relating to that part of the body that got dissociated. Or a spine, or even a more serious injury. It will bug you, right? Because that's that part of the body trying to address itself to you. You didn't listen, so now it's going to have to be cut or injured or have some other, dystrophy attached to it until you give it love, until you go there and take focus on your body again. But you can't even do that if your ethos, if your culture is completely saturated with your popcorn and your video game. The kids that see, like some of the kids that come into your dojo, right? They don't know their body. They know video games. If they're going to kill and do martial arts, it's through some digital, these video games, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So what doing is taking them out of the video game and saying, no, do you realize you have a body? Stop moving that man around, that virtual man, and do it yourself.
It's better when you do it yourself. I mean, you're in the video. You are the video game. You're already in one.
Yes, but the difference is that on the video game, your mind can go crazy into the character. When you're having to do it with your own body, a different morality is involved, because now you have to actually sweat some sweat and blood. So your attitude is different to whom you're killing and whom you're engaging. If it's just a video game, then all the sadistic, pornographic stuff can come forth unabated.
Exactly.
Because it's just a video game and the guy dies, he's just a digital gelf. If it's you in combat, there's real fear, there's real attack, there's real feeling of pride if you win. There's all sorts of other mechanisms of the body and mind that stop the person being pathological. You know what I mean?
Right, it's true. And the last point I would make about that would be that when I just had a conversation with a parent of one of the kids, and they're like, well, you're showing them all these moves of combat, like they're going to go to school and they're going to start doing this on their friends. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. They actually need something to vent and to express this energy through. It's not a negative thing at all. It's just become negative because there's a repression of it. And what happens is that they actually learn that they're not the only ones that get to do that hip toss or that, punch or kick or that Aikido move or whatever. Their partner gets to do it back on them right away. So they're actually learning that they're learning control. They're learning that, if I do that too hard, that actually hurts, because I've had that done to me before. They understand, there's moments of victory, moments of defeat, moments of success, moments of failure. And they start to really get used to the flow of how life works. So they do need to get a couple knocks around the side of the head once in a while. They do need to get out there and be a little bit, in a positive, competitive atmosphere with their friends, where they're just trying to bring out the best in themselves. And by doing that, you're not getting, I've seen it 100% of the time. I don't have parents coming back really and saying, oh, my kid's out there beating people up because you're teaching them how to fight. I see the opposite. I see these kids becoming like the shining light in their schools, where they're actually being role models, and everybody wants to be like them, because they're walking around with a sense of confidence that says, I don't need to mess with you. You don't even know how to fight. If I want a good fight, I'm going to go to the dojo tonight and do it with one of my friends who knows exactly what he's doing. And it's a totally different dynamic. And, it definitely relates to everything we've been discussing.
And think what will happen when that kid realizes he's a defender of those who are being picked on by some loathsome bully.
Yeah,
now he can
exactly.
just grab his hand and break his finger and go, you'll never see that guy again.
Exactly.
That guy will never be, he'll cross the street when he sees us coming. That is a very, very tall thing, you see.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. It really is, and so I'm a huge believer in that. It's very needed. And remember, just as we use words to communicate in language, people forget there's a language of the body. The moves in martial arts and Tai Chi and stuff like that is a language. It's ABCs. It's an alphabet, but it's a language because people say, well, you keep on talking about all these other sensory inputs to the brain and all. Don't understand any of this. There's only 5 senses. No, there isn't. Just like there's not one alphabet or one language. The body's movements is an expression, is an art form, is an actual language communicating in the way that animals or birds, right? Because even our physical language, the one that is with words, derived from bird song and from animal song. This is a fact. The Gerald Massey's and so many other people have proven this beyond doubt. But your movements of your body are equally responses, equally forms of communication. But if you don't open them up, then your arms, your fingers, your legs, your body, your torso, your head, all of the meridians, all of the pressure points, they don't get to speak. And do you know the consequences of it? They're equally as bad as if you were, muffled. You were a person who could speak, but somebody put a muzzle on you and you had to go through the years never speaking. Well, it's the same thing you do when you muzzle the body. It is going to react to not just stiffness, but insomnia and aggression and frustration and build up and build up and build up. Then Big Brother is, like I said, it hands you a culture of foods and suppressants, video games, which you can then vicariously butcher whoever you want. And so the thing becomes pathological. So I talk to parents like you do, and I say, look, the reason why this client or this person may go and do this wrong or whatever is because you see they're in a culture that is wrong. They're not broken. And what I'm going to do with them in this reading or with this chart is we're going to try and work on it to see how they can get out of that broken system creatively and proactively and using their numbers and finding out who they are with their astrology, because those are like tools. They're like weapons. When you understand what armaments you've got psychically, what are your key numbers, what your planets work with you, this year, maybe different the next year. But when you know what you've got in your Aladdin's cave, your armory, then you can say, oh, this year I'm not meant to work with a spear. I'm meant to work with a club. I'm not meant to come at people in the front. I'm meant to, attack them from behind. Or now I'm meant to be totally defensive. Or now I'm meant to be completely passive and neutral. All of this is vital. But basically, the body's movements physically is a form of communication. And when you open up that communication, other deeper parts of the ancestral brain open up that are deeper than the senses 5. They undergird the senses 5. And if that strata, subconscious strata, is silent, then your 5 senses, even though they may be operating enough for you to think, well, they're working, what are you talking about? No, they're not working. They're not working at full pranic level. So therefore, then if they're not working at full pranic level, how can your perception of the world around you or other people around you be clear and clean? How can you be clairvoyant? To be clairvoyant is not to sharpen the 5 senses from the top. It's to get down deep into the medulla and get down into the, past the limbic brain, right down into the spinal intelligence and awaken that, which is a kind of an animalistic thing, which is why Hatha Yoga, right, the scorpion movements and all these movements were based on animals. You think that because they were stupid? It's because they understood that there's a part of our brain. And every culture had this, where you work with the animal totems and you work with the martial arts and you work with the serpent energy, right, the kundalini, all of that, to get back, not later as it was made into the priests, which is all in the head, right, but the original Hatha Yoga, the original martial arts wasn't about kundalini as it's been explained today, where energy is descending from above. This is a lie. This is fiction. This is mysteria. Energy doesn't come from above any place. It comes from the core within to the surface within.
Right.
And back. Just like it is when you go to sleep. Why do you feel sleepy? Because something flags, energy recedes to the core, and you start feeling drowsy, and you'll even fall over if you don't go to bed. And then when you wake up in the morning, is some energy descending from above, some crown chakra? Bullshit. Right? It's moved from the crown chakra, but it's not where you think it is. That's all that priest shit of ups and downs and aboves and belows and slaves and masters. But the man who's free, who knows, I am my slave and master. I know what heaven and hell is, what diabolos and what God are. God is my core, and the so-called Satan, after the maniacs stopped talking about it, is just the surface. It's the ego that faces the world, that has to learn from worldly experience. But I have a core reservoir that is accumulated over the years. And the communication between those two hemispheres must not be armored, like Reich is saying. They have to be fluid. And there's only one way to get it fluid. The mind can't do it. You have to move. You've got to get the body moving. And you have to do it, and just running around the track isn't going to do it. Playing handball, I mean, every member of parliament goes to swat a fucking, squash ball about. That's not what I'm talking about. It has to be intentional. It has to be intentionalized that you're doing this ritualistically, that you're doing it for purposes. In the beginning, you may not completely understand what it is, but as you go and start reading more of the literature and using these great men of Bruce Lee, as mentors, and even the greater ones behind him, and the great Aikido masters, you start to, you get it. And when I watch the Water Margin, or I was Monkey, or I watched Chuck Norris, or Steven Seagal, or any of these guys, that's what I was looking at. Yeah, I admired the fact that they could overcome an enemy, but I was looking at what it means to be manly, to be like, oh my God, what the hell is this shit? This is
exactly, yeah.
Right? But this is like, the silent flute. This is like shit, and this to me was deeply, deeply spiritual. Deeply spiritual. And as I learned more and more about it, I've just simply built on that knowledge, built on it to understand its absolute preciousness. And if I had my time to start over again, or if I was back in a role teaching children again, Jesus, it would be the somatic. I would be bringing in somebody like you right away. I'd be saying, yeah, I got stuff to talk to you, but we're going to do that a bit later. And I would do the Steiner thing. I would get the kids out in the morning and be working with the body energies, and only after the puff, they've had they're like almost sweating with adrenaline at that point, when there's a natural need for repose now. So going into the classroom, sitting down, stretching out, feeling the body. And now when there is this moment of repose, then an intellectual type of direction can begin. And even then, it has to be of a certain kind, which Steiner and Krishnamurti knew. It can't be authoritarian. It has to include, and it has to be curious, and it has to be rebuttal, and it has to be argumentative, and all of that. Even then, there's a certain way to do that. But my God, even besides that, the body must move, because I feel that we should all be wanting revenge on the sometimes up to 15 years of chronic caging and negation of the bodily energy. We run into this in the hermit, and we get into the hangman, it'll be even more, because that's what that guy's trying to do. He's going to go, it's all over, mate. I'm not, I disagree with the stasis of the body. And once I'm into that, then I know I'm making, a prana move on many levels, and that creates a deeper sense of clairvoyance, a bodily clairvoyance. It's not really of the senses at all. It's a sort of 6th, 7th, and 8th sense, because the body itself, these underlying areas of consciousness have become awakened, and they will help them to widen, as Blake said, right? They break how did he describe it? It's like, a river with the banks, they flood over. It floods over, and the senses are blasted open into a greater sense of vision. And he was a very, very fiery person. He was like a kind of an Aries. He was actually born in Sagittarius. Very fiery person. So I know that for him, walking and bodily exercise was extremely important, But it has to be with intention. Obviously, you're aware of that. It can't just be swatting balls around,
No, and it can't be forced, like you said. It has to be you got to create an environment where that natural exuberance and that natural energy wants to flow, and you're just directing and working with the flow and learning about it. If you're trying to force things like what they do in schools, is force these kids to sit down, sit still, or we're going to smack you with a ruler or whatever. There's no reason nobody's learning anything, or that's the reason nobody's learning anything, is because the mind is not and the body's not primed to learn something, and they just can't say, "Oh, we have a 45-minute gym class, every couple of days or whatever." That's not enough. I totally agree. It's got to be hands-on. It's got to be a combination of things, and it can't be forced at all.
Yeah, there was we had several gyms. Physical culture has been big in Ireland, but I was so poor I couldn't afford it, so we'd go and sneak into the gym and just watch the martial arts. We knew the teacher because we had gone down to ask him about signing on, but it was always too costly, so we just sit on the balcony to watch the moves, and you can learn a lot just from just watching and then doing it yourself, the punch bag or some of the basic exercises kind of thing. And so that's how I learned the basic Qigong. Later I had to go back to the net and brush up on it, but basic, not Qigong, it was a basic Aikido, because the warm-up exercises of Aikido, those are absolutely top-notch. And so you could learn most of what was really needed just by watching these guys. We didn't have the money to pay for it, and, no way. We couldn't even afford to bus money down to the freaking leisure center, but at least we could watch how they did it and then go home and, do it ourselves. And then watching, all the kung fu stuff, you can't imagine how big, I don't know if you know in Ireland how big, Fu Manchu and all that, back in the 70s, the kids were absolutely obsessed. They put the bands around their head and run huge gangs of these kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely running riot. It was one of the biggest things, bigger than skateboards, bigger than breakdancing. It was Fu Manchu and the hordes of, martial art warmongering and stuff like that, and all sorts of programs like that where people were obsessed back in Ireland, It was a very strange thing to see, But there they were all dressed up in black with their red headbands,
Oh, I can imagine.
Chopping everybody, and so martial arts has had a huge, huge part in people around us. It's just, if you couldn't participate in it because, money wasn't there, then, you still would watch the shows and go down to the leisure centre, look through the window and see what they're doing, All the middle class guys, be able to pay for these long classes, and especially kung fu and things like that were very expensive because they're so lengthy. The classes go on, and
yeah,
they're very, 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 very. Jiu-jitsu, I'm thinking more. That was more intense, and it was more pricey because only a certain amount of people could commit to regimens of that kind and stuff. And in those days, in the 70s, there wasn't more free, cheap classes. There wasn't that.
Yeah.
You had to commit to a teacher who was much more stringent and much more, like a dictator, and they wanted their weight in gold, for you to join the club and all that stuff. And there was just no way, as I said, I couldn't even afford to bus fares down to these particular gyms. And so it was impossible. So you had to pick it up in other ways. But it was a lifelong interest. And then finally, when I realized the spiritual aspects of it are equally dominant, it continued. So I have a great admiration, for what you're doing. And I'm a big advocate of it. I think that much, much more important than some of the intellectual stuff. That's important too. But the children, the political systems, the way we're moving forward, it's only going to happen when the soma, the body itself, is incorporated. And then when the body's exhausted, in a positive way, healthy way, then comes a moment where there's a receptivity, and it's at that point then that a teaching of an intellectual mode, comes to play. So maybe we can get into that in other interviews, but I'm gonna have to go get something to eat right now. But that's a very, very important aspect of all of this as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and well said. And we'll definitely do some more on it. I'm working on producing my own work. For those listening, I've finally got my new site up. It's called wayoftetruthwarrior.com. I'm going to be adding all kinds of commentaries and articles and information for you. There's already a lot of stuff there already to get people started, just so they can understand the philosophy behind this. And I'm trying to build this in the context of what's happening in the world and the whole importance of being aware and becoming a martial artist in life, and how we can utilize this great body of knowledge, just like you've done with your work, Michael. I look up to you and what you've done, and you've inspired me to try to bring forward what I have to offer and what I've spent my life studying. And you've actually brought out a lot of amazing points that many martial artists would never even know. Even though they might be masters of the physical arts, they're missing out completely. So we're trying to tie this all back together, bring it up to the fore, and provide solutions for people. So we'll wrap this interview up today with that. I think it's a good positive note to finish with, and everybody can go and check out the sources and the links we're going to provide in this video. And I also look forward to the upcoming show we're going to be doing on the Hermit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll do that next week because there's, again, even in 3 hours we couldn't get into everything, so there'll be really a lot of brilliant points to get into from that.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks, Michael, for your time, and we'll have this up soon, and ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in, and we will definitely catch you next time.